With so many Magic sets coming out so fast now, you know Wizards is gonna miss a couple times with the mechanics. So here's my top 5 worst mechanics in Magic for 2024. Number 5, Suspect. This is a murders at Markov Manor mechanic that people have already forgotten about. A suspected creature has menace and can't block. I don't like this one because you have to kind of remember that a creature is suspected. There's no suspect counter or anything that you use. Mechanics like this that do things to creatures but don't give you physical ways to track it always seem bad to me, like Exert was. Number 4, Spree. An Outlaws of Thunder Junction mechanic that is just a more confusing version of Kicker. Lots of mechanics in Magic are, the joke is just Kicker, but this is a worse Kicker. So with Kicker, at least you get A, and then you also get B if the Kicker cost was paid. But with Spree, you have to pay some default amount that does nothing, and then you build your own spell. It's kind of like spell a la carte. The plus side of these things being modal, I feel is outweighed for me personally by the clunky way that the casting costs are shown on the card. I don't like it. Number 3, Expend, a Bloomburrow mechanic that does something depending on how much mana you spent that turn. Again, this is just something players have to mentally track, which can be problematic. Also, almost every card had Expend 4, but there was one case of Expend 6 in the precons and 2 Expend 8s, and that seems strange to me. Why don't you just make it always 4? Number 2, Morbid. While this isn't a new mechanic, they did try to bring it back in Magic Foundations. I don't like Morbid for 2 reasons. The first is that it doesn't always act the same way. Sometimes it's a triggered ability at the end of your turn if a creature died. Sometimes it's like a replacement effect, or a card acts differently if something died that turn. I prefer keywords that mean the same thing all the time. Second, Morbid tends to be a bad mechanic because it relies on something else to have happened within a short window in the game. So if this doesn't happen, a creature dying, the ability doesn't really do anything, and it kind of sucks. And the worst mechanic in 2024 was Survival. Yeah, Survival gets my award for the worst mechanic of the year as something that looks like a top-down design, which seems thematically good, but just plays poorly. The concept is that your creature is alive after combat and gets to do something cool, but I think this one was just too tricky to implement. The mechanic just looks at if the creature is tapped after combat, and I think it would have been better if it was a delayed trigger that happened at the end of combat if the creature attacked. The mechanic was also really bad and limited because in games of Magic, sometimes your creatures have to block, and you can't rely on a creature that is only good if it attacks and if it's alive after that. It's too situational. They also didn't print enough ways to just tap your creatures to kind of cheat on the mechanic. Survival like Morbid requires things to happen to actually work. I imagine designing these cards and the supporting cards in the set was tricky, and it seems like they lean towards under-supporting it rather than over-supporting it. So those are my worst ones for 2024. Let me know if you have one you disliked more.